Something massive just happened. The DTCC, the company that settles every single stock and bond trade on Wall Street, processing $114 trillion in assets annually, just announced they're building its tokenized securities platform on Stellar. Stellar and Ripple share the same co-founder and were created to solve similar problems. And this partnership might just be the beginning of everything for both XRP and XLM. So today, I'm going to break down what just happened with the DTCC and Stellar and how massive that could be, and show you what role XRP could play in this tokenized future. So before we get started, you really need to understand what the DTCC is. The DTCC stands for Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. They settle every stock and bond trade on Wall Street, every ETF transaction, every security settlement, and they process $2.5 quadrillion in securities transactions annually. If you've ever bought a stock, the DTCC is the company that made sure it actually ended up in your account. So how does it work today? Well, when you buy a stock, the trade doesn't settle instantly. It takes one business day. The US moved from T+2, which is 2-day settlement, down to T+1, which is 1-day settlement in May of 2024. Before that, it was 2 days. And before that, in 2017, it was 3 days that it took between the clearinghouses and the brokers to actually be able to settle these trades. In the early 1990s, it was 5 days was the delay in settlement for all this stuff. So during the settlement window, the DTCC actually acts like the middleman. They verify the buyer has the money and the seller has the shares that they need to be able to swap. And they hold the actual securities in a central depository, not like the olden days when you used to take your stock certificates out and put them in your safe, which is what most people do with their crypto today when they buy it on an exchange and they put it on a cold wallet. So your broker doesn't actually physically hold these shares. The DTCC does. And this system has improved over decades, but it still takes a full business day for them to actually settle between the counterparties and intermediaries they deal with. So how could they move to T+0? Okay, how could this happen real time? Well, they would need tokenized securities, and they would need real-time settlement on the back end of the stock market. It would settle in seconds instead of a full day. Ownership is recorded directly on the blockchain. No need for a central depository to hold anything, which is also a reason I think the DTCC may be, shaking in their boots a little bit, because with real-time settlement, you don't necessarily need a depository clearing corporation. The other thing about blockchain is there's fewer intermediaries, which means lower costs and less counterparty risk. And that's why the DTCC is moving to the blockchain in order to be able to solve this, and why it's such a big deal. They're upgrading their old systems, and they're going to have to move to real-time settlement. So on June 1st, the DTCC announced that they're connecting their tokenized securities platform to the Stellar blockchain. They didn't partner with a private blockchain or build their own, as a lot of people thought that they were going to and expected in the first place. They chose a public blockchain. The integration is targeted for 2027 launch and a full rollout. The testnet phase runs all the way through late 2026. And on that news, XLM surged 44% in a single week. The market understood immediately what this meant. And arguably, this is one of the biggest institutional validations any blockchain has ever received. So let's talk about why they chose Stellar. Well, the relationship goes back years. The partnership didn't just come out of nowhere. The relationship between the DTCC and Stellar actually stretches almost a decade. In 2023, DTCC acquired a company called Securities, and they rebranded it as DTCC Digital Assets. So what is Stellar and the XRP connection? Well, they also have a very shared history, just like the DTCC and Stellar. Stellar was founded in 2014 by Jed McCaleb. And if his name sounds familiar, it's because Jed was a co-founder of Ripple back in 2012, but he left Ripple in 2013 and created Stellar a year later. Both networks were designed from the ground up to solve cross-border payment. And really, Stellar is almost a direct replica of the XRPL, even though they have Sorband smart contracts and been a bit more progressive on some of the DeFi and things that they've implemented on that network. A lot of the underlying infrastructure and the way that it's been created, almost exactly the same. So let's talk about the technical issues. They have very similar consensus mechanisms. Neither relies on energy-intensive, proof of work or proof of stake to be able to settle these transactions. And they both settle transactions in seconds. Stellar finalizes in under 6 seconds. The XRP ledger typically settles in 3 to 5. But both have transaction fees that are paid in the underlying asset and are fractions of a penny. Even the price has been pretty well correlated. If you've been watching the charts, it's very unusual that one moves without the other. So what's the key difference? They are very similar, but they target different markets. XRP targets institutions, banks, payment providers, and large institutional entities, and also enterprises. XRP focuses on high value transfers and liquidity for enterprise use cases. Stellar, on the other hand, targets individuals, the unbanked, peer-to-peer transaction, remittance, and financial inclusion. So You need the same infrastructure to be able to have real-time settlement for both, but their target markets are definitely different. XRP is the bridge asset for institutional cross-border payments, whereas XLM is the bridge currency for individual and small business transactions. They solve fundamentally the same problem: slow and expensive cross-border payments, but they serve at opposite ends of the financial system. But before I explain XRP's role in all this, I want you to stay ahead of how tokenization is rapidly reshaping the financial system and what it means for your holding. All you gotta do is join the Beyond Broke Mastermind. It's linked in the comments below, where we track all the developments in real time. And if you want to position yourself and your assets before institutional adoption happens here in 2026, you might want to go check out digitalfamilyoffice.io. So let's talk about XRP and its role with the DTCC. If the DTCC chooses Stellar, does that mean that they're not going to use XRP? Well, it's not the case. Tokenization is not a zero-sum game. The market opportunity is measured in trillions of dollars, potentially even quadrillions, maybe a lot more than that over the long term. So there's enough to go around for multiple networks to thrive. XRP and Stellar can serve different parts of the same ecosystem. Stellar handles the securities tokenization, and the settlement layer would then be settled through XRP. XRP handles the liquidity and the cross-border transactions between the different counterparties. Over time, we'll have a unified global network of exchanges. Right now, a lot of it's siloed and segmented, but this is what galvanizes all of these systems. And that's what Ripple's been building for over a decade. Interoperability between chains is growing. The future, as we all know at this point, is likely multi-chain, not just one winner take all. Analysts expect the DTCC to run pilots testing cross-chain interoperability between Stellar and other permission ledgers. So nothing stops the DTCC or other institutions from using XRP for liquidity, while Stellar handles the asset issuance, so the tokenization of the stocks themselves. Ripple has its own tokenized initiative with ROUSD and the XRPL, and both networks benefit from the broader shift of traditional finance onto the blockchain rails. So why is this announcement bullish for both of them? Well, the DTCC validation proves that public blockchains that allow for private instances can meet institutional compliance and requirements. This opens the door for institutions to consider public blockchains instead of their own privatized blockchains that they've been using and trialing on the back end for years. And if companies then settle that $114 trillion annually and they trust these public blockchains, that changes the conversation for everybody. So XRP is already positioned. XRP has regulatory clarity from the court case between them and the SEC and Ripple. Ripple also has, over 75 regulatory licenses globally, and they operate in 55 plus countries. If the DTCC can use Stellar, there's no reason other institutions wouldn't use the XRPL for their own use cases. And again, tokenization of the stocks themselves and back-end settlement are two very different things. And you could even say that Velo is the trial case for the tokenization of stocks on Stellar, if you want to go check that one. So this is how the narrative is shifting. The conversation is no longer, can blockchains handle real assets? The conversation is now, which blockchains should be used for which purpose? This is a fundamentally different question than's been asked any time since Bitcoin actually was created, 15 years ago. And it benefits everyone building real infrastructure on chain. So in closing, the DTCC just validated public blockchains for Wall Street. This story isn't just about one winner. Stellar and XRP share the same DNA. They solve complementary problems. And as trillions of dollars move onto these blockchain rails, there's room for both. So now the question isn't whether this happens, but if you're positioned before it does. And again, like I always say, nothing here is financial advice. It's all for entertainment and educational purposes. You should always consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. And all the opinions shared are my opinions and not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or any of its subsidiaries. But if you do need a financial advisor, you can always go work with Digital Ascension Group, where they do have licensed professionals in order to be able to help you with all of this. And if you want to learn more and stay up to date on all the news, all the amendments, and how this is going to shake out, I would love it if you would join the Beyond Broke Mastermind. The link is pinned in the comments below. So until next time, stay curious, stay ahead of the curve, and we'll see you on the next one.